Madison Square Garden, and I got Canal Street, and I could still smell the same smell that I had smelled the year before. It was still in the air. That was thick smoke. I mean, asbestos, as you say, every computer, everything, pieces of glass with no glass. I mean, those are huge towers. And where did that all go? Into your lungs. When I come up here every year, I have a Philadelphia support group. And my wife makes me, she just gets so upset. She said, please, please don't bring 9/11 up in our support group. I did once and we almost got in a fight. There was a couple men in there. But you have to remember what happened to the people. I have one other person in my support group. Now, we used to have like 25 in here. One other person in there. The others have got nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I always want to say to them, what do you think happened? But the thing is, at 9/11, you just don't want to go there. You can't believe how lucky I am. I took my son home. I'm able to investigate how he died. But for a mother to think that your son just disappeared into thin air, into air. I hate to say it, but people were inhaling human, whatever it is, molecules. I had someone in the support group, the guy was 6'4", 250 pounds, and had found nothing. You'd think you would find a piece of bone. So I was we were at Ground Zero, or we always go out to dinner on the 10th, our support group. And one of them actually started talking to me about, geez, he said, I've been really studying history. Going back to World War I, trying to get the connection. I was really hoping he'd get into the idea that, connecting the dots to 9/11. And his son, of course, we found nothing. So I just broached the subject real quickly, and I said, well, what do you think happened? He said, don't you think there were, I really think my son Bobby died from an explosion. His whole chest was filled of glass. His face, it was like he was hit by a shotgun. But I had an intact body, but he had one leg, he was perfectly fine. Well, his son, he has no clue. So then I mentioned explosion. That this one, and they said, what do you mean explosion? So many people, especially in the 9/11 community, the idea of an explosion is just beyond their comprehension. They said, well, of course the tower's coming down. I said, well, bodies don't disappear when buildings come down. Not just totally disappear. So we actually got in an argument. My wife she was beside herself. That's the first time then I've actually, and I said to my wife afterwards, I got a support group, I support them all the time. But why once can't they support me? Because I have these theories about 9/11. So, the next day we get down to Ground Zero. His daughter was there. She had a McCain button on. But she came up to me. So this is why what you're all doing is so important, because you don't know where you're planting the seeds. Planting those seeds are so important. But our daughter lives in Minneapolis right now. She's like 34 years old. And she walked up to me and she says, I really feel bad. I don't know anything about 9/11. She said, send me books, So I told her I'm going to send her DVD. She says, I really want to look into this. So you really are making a difference. I've learned that. As depressed as I get about this whole thing, I just, it's why everyone comes up here, to get feedback from everyone, that your work is really coming around. So, again, as I said before, you come into, my field's coming in, I get this high. I'm with my son's friends. I'm with everybody from 9/11. That is a high. You feel good. You're out with the family members eating dinner, right? But, of course, anybody's taking drugs, I've certainly, drank enough. With every high comes your low. Today's a tremendously low day. And sometimes I wish I could take medication, to get yourself even. But the thing is with the low, you know, you always know the highs will come back, and that's, of course, where the anger comes. So I start walking home last night. Someone on the street approaches me, asking for money. Now, I think I spend more money than giving money out there than I do in cabs in New York City. So if I have an extra buck, I'll always give someone an extra buck, but I don't have any more money in my pocket. I just had a 20. So the guy, big guy, comes up to me, he says, you got any extra? I said, look, I don't have anything left. He says, but he kept pursuing me. I said, no. Then I just said to him, I said, look, I'm really down there. I said, I had my son murdered. And he said, well, fuck your son. And so I said, well, fuck you. Yeah. So, but that's not good. Because I had a threatening call a couple months ago from Troy. Everybody knows Troy. And like an idiot, I got on after he said, are you Bob McIlvaine? And I said, yeah. And he said, did your son die in 9/11? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I hope someone puts a fucking bolt in your head. Well, I went nuts. And I'm calling him MF this, and and it's not good to lose your temper that way. Right? And what did the guy do? He put it on YouTube. Well, I'll tell you, you feel soiled. You're trying to keep yourself under control. But he puts on YouTube, and I'm saying MF this, and God knows what I said to him. My wife comes running upstairs, what's happening? But that's what you really got to watch yourself. So anyway, the guy says that to him. And then he kept walking with me. I wasn't about to get in a fight because I'd get killed. He was a big guy. Then he came up and he says, well, how'd you lose your son? I said, 9/11. Then he just stopped back and, hey, look, man, I'm so sorry I said that. He says, but don't you understand? This is all bullshit. We're nothing. All of us are pawns. We actually had a nice conversation. It's the most intelligent thing. I've never gotten a conversation like that from anybody from my township in the Philadelphia area. Don't you realize we're all pawns in this? And I have to realize that. From the American injury, slavery, this is what our government does. This is what all governments in the Western world has done. That's why history isn't so important. But this guy had more perspective than most people I know. This is the game this country plays. Voting for Obama, voting for McCain, voting for anyone. I don't know what the answer is, and I think maybe we all have to get together and find out a plan that this has to stop.
Don't confuse real politics with fake politics.
Pardon me?
You have to realize not to confuse fake politics with real politics. They're offering us the placebo in the form of Obama and McCain.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Not to be confused with real politics.
I agree with you. And that's why I read more history than anything. But I actually had a nice conversation. That was so refreshing. It started from anger, but then, so I ended up giving him a 20. That man knew what he was doing. But, hey, I give anybody $20 to have a nice conversation. It was a civil conversation. It didn't last for like an hour or anything, a few minutes. But he just said, don't you? And I did realize that. To see the people in Colombia, how they've died, Guatemala, Honduras, to be in Japan, walking with people that were there when the atomic bomb came down, and how they've suffered, and how they don't want war. I think people around the world understand. That guy from Russia that came up to me and talked about zero. And he says, somehow he got optimistic or down about all this and depressed. He just doesn't have hope. And he's not looking at the United States, he's looking at all countries. I think the people of the world understand this, so somehow I don't know how we're going to get it out. So, great, I figured my night's over. I go home, I get a buzz up in the bar at the hotel. I figured that'll get me to sleep because the night before I couldn't sleep at all. So I had a couple drinks, had a couple sambucas before I went downstairs. So I turned the TV on, flipping through. Governor Kane's on TV, talking. I said, oh, Christ. But of course I had to watch it. Now here that is, I truly, truly hate Governor Kane and Lee Hamilton. I don't want to go into the whole story about Lee Hamilton, what a gatekeeper he is, but that's why he was set up.